Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan. She is a veteran of both the Wisconsin Army and Air National Guard, and she served in a pioneering role as part of a cultural support team with U.S. Special Forces. We're also joined today by Therese Hughes, an acclaimed photographer and author. Her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit was on display at the Women in Military Service to America Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. In March of 2021, her book based on that exhibit of women veterans will be released. And Sergeant Buchanan is among those featured. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us. Therese, let me start with you. This is the fourth and final, at least for now, installment of our series on some of the amazing female veterans that you have met and interviewed. Your mission, as you've stated, is to bring more recognition to women veterans. So whether it's through these interviews, your upcoming book, or your photography, the interviews that you've conducted over the past decade, what do you want people to know about the ladies you've profiled and really all women who serve?
Well, I want men, women, young men and young women to recognize that there is a place in the military if they're looking for a career. And if they're not looking for a career, there's still a place to get excellent education and tools that can help them out in the workforce. And this is a competitive workforce today. And I think that the military offers some strategic skills that they can use to transfer out into the workforce. The most important thing to me is that because my mother was an invisible veteran, I didn't know about military service for women, and I want young women to see women who look like them, who have done something, taking this step in the military and have served and have worked, who like the work they've done and appreciate our nation and our flag. And that's my biggest hope.
Therese, you had the chance to interview Sonia shortly after she returned from a significant deployment. What drew you to her and her story?
Well, first of all, I did not know Sonia existed. My mother's was from Wisconsin, and I was there interviewing women veterans, and I feel a real kinship to them because my mother was from there, and she enlisted there. The young woman that told me about Sonia was Carolyn Morgan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she said, Therese, I have a young woman you must interview. Now, mind you, she talks a lot. She just got back from a deployment and she has a great story to tell. And I went and I have to tell you, I was, first of all, very impressed by the ability she had, by the training she had, by her willingness to reach out to people across nations and to help strengthen those bonds. So from there, the rest is history.
Well, Therese, thank you so much for the work that you have done, continue to do, and for connecting us with these wonderful veterans. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, let's meet Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan now. Sonia, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is definitely an honor, especially with all the remarkable people that you have interviewed in the past. So it's awesome to be here.
Well, thank you. Let's begin at the very beginning of your story. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Killeen, Texas, and I was raised all over the globe. My father was a chief foreign officer for the Navy, so I kind of grew up moving around every 2 to 4 years on different Navy bases.
And as we'll discuss in a minute, you actually joined the National Guard at age 35, but what did you learn growing up in a Navy family or maybe a military family about military service, what it meant and what it required?
In my household, I always refer to my dad as kind of like a Roman pillar. He's very strong and steadfast, and really nothing can break him. But he's always been a shining example for myself and all my siblings. And I'm the oldest of 9, and out of 9 kids, 7 of us, we either married somebody in the service or rejoined ourselves. And I think you're kind of secluded when you grow up on a military base and you don't really experience part of what the civilian population offers. I mean, when the flag is raised and it's lowered, you know to stop when you hear it, and you need to salute. And the structure is just very different. So there's a lot of honor and pride in growing up in the military and service. You understand what it means to give to something that's bigger than yourself.
Your story is very interesting about how you decided to serve in the National Guard. It was in the late 2000s. You were going through a difficult time personally, and the economy was in a bad place. So how did that lead to you joining the Army National Guard at that time?
I am unlike most. I did join in my mid-30s, and I was married for 17 years, and unfortunately I got divorced. And at that time I was homeschooling my kids and hadn't really worked at all, had a degree and never used it. And at the time in 2008, the housing market was really bad. So there really wasn't a huge need to hire an interior designer, especially somebody who had never worked in the industry before. I had met an amazing couple at a martial arts school that I worked at part-time, and they were talking to me about the Army National Guard, and they're like, you should join the Army Guard. And I was like, I chuckled a little bit, because even though I grew up in the military, I had no idea what the National Guard was. It was a foreign concept to me. So they explained it to me how the Guard is really an asset for the state, so you fall under the governor, and then also the president, so you could go on deployments as well. And she said, why don't you think about joining? And when you get back, come and see us, and we could probably help you get a full-time job. So I get all the benefits of being an active duty service member, but I wouldn't really have to move outside where I was living, which was important to me because I had to put my kids in school for the first time, and I really didn't think it was in their best interest for me just to join active duty and then move them to a different state, out of their surroundings and their comfort zone.
Is there a particular reason you chose the Army National Guard initially?
Only because that's just who I knew. That's the couple that was taking their kids to the martial arts school. They were both active duty Army National Guard. So that's the only reason. But I'm glad I did, because it gave me opportunities that I never in a million years would have dreamed that I would ever have been able to do.
So what happened once you signed up? Did you go immediately to training?
I left in January of 2008 to basic training. I returned in May of 2008, and then I literally walked into Joint Force Headquarters, and I spoke to Chief Chrysler, and he was like, welcome back. When can you start? And I was very blessed to walk into a full-time job pretty much the next day.
That's fantastic. Now, does Guard basic training differ at all from regular Army basic training? And if there are differences, what are they?
No, there's really no difference. Everybody, if you're going to be in the reserve component or National Guard or active duty, everybody goes to the same training and also the same tech school or whatever type of education that you need for your job. The only difference is that active duty immediately goes to their duty station, where if you're in the Guard or reserves, you go back to your home station.
And is it rare for National Guard members to find a full-time position, especially right out of the gate?
Yes, I would say definitely out of the gate. In the Guard, it's such a small community. It's all about who you know, and I just happened to be very blessed that I happened to know somebody that was in a position where they could open up a door for me, which is a great thing. So here in Wisconsin, we have about a little over 8,000 National Guard members in the Army. The air side has a little over 2,000. So in order to support the over 8,000 National Guard service members, there's probably about 1,000 that are active duty Guard, or they're on some type of full-time order.
So what was your job initially once you came on full-time?
Initially, when I came on, I basically was in HR. I was human resource. I did paperwork, and then I did ID cards for service members and retirees.
Did you have any particular programs? And we'll get to the really interesting one when we take our break here in just a minute. But was there anything you were particularly excited to try, or a program you were hoping to get into, or were you just glad to have the full-time job at that point?
I was glad to have the full-time job. It was definitely a different experience for me, walking in, being a little bit more older, more mature, if you'd like to say,
Sure.
and then trying to understand the culture of the military, because it's very different from the civilian world. So at that time, since I was so young in my military career, I didn't even know all the opportunities that were at my fingertips. I learned about those probably a little bit later on.
Sonia, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with much more with Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan, currently with the Wisconsin Air National Guard, formerly of the Wisconsin Army National Guard, right here on Veterans Chronicles. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. Thank you so much for being with us. Our guest this week is Wisconsin Air National Guard Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan. Prior to that, she served with the Wisconsin Army National Guard. And now, Sonia, I want to talk about a very interesting opportunity that you had. You entered the Guard at a time when new opportunities were becoming available, and one of those was that you were part of the first cultural support team deployment. So I got a lot of questions about this, but first of all, what exactly is a cultural support team?
A cultural support team, it's a team that's made up of 2 women in order to assist any type of special operations team to fulfill their mission. Basically, the concept was in the Middle East, where you had a lot of these small special forces teams, they couldn't access about 40% of the population. So it really was affecting how much intel they were getting, and that obviously affects their mission. So they came up with this idea to bring on women, train them in a small team environment, integrate them into either a MARSOC team, a Green Beret team in our ODA, or a SEAL team. And that way, when they go out on foot patrols or they're living in a village, they're able to have females there so that we can actually talk with women and children, and it would help access more information.
Now, explain that a little bit more. Is there something cultural about the fact that women or children were more difficult to talk to in terms of the special forces? Did they just feel comfortable or more comfortable talking to women? What was the barrier before that you were able to help bridge?
The cultural aspect was that in parts of the Middle East, it's very uncommon that women and children would engage in a conversation with a male outside of their household. So it was a huge stumbling block for them. And in order for them to engage in a conversation so that they can, and to build rapport and a relationship with some of these women that lived in the villages, they thought the best way is to have women with us. I mean, they would identify with us easier. We would be able to have a conversation with them and build a relationship so that when they see us every day, they feel more comfortable about sharing information with us.
Did you have an interpreter with you? Was there a language barrier, and how did you get through that?
We did have an interpreter with us. Once we were selected, we attended the JFK Special Warfare School. We went to cultural class, and then we also took Dari and Pashto. But we did, every team that was out there we had a female interpreter with us as well, which made it a lot easier. Because even if you were in a village and you walked 2 miles down, the dialect of that particular language would be very different than where you just were.
Oh, wow. Were your interpreters able to adapt to that?
Yes. Oh yeah. My interpreter, she was amazing. She grew up in Afghanistan and she currently lives in San Francisco, but she was very quick, and we never could not understand what anybody was trying to relay to us.
How did the special forces react to having you guys there, whether it was training or on deployment? How did that relationship go? I
would say during training at first, since the group of women that I was with were basically the first group that the DoD sanctioned. So it was a brand new experience. They integrated us for training. I would say most men, they were kind of taken back because you have an entire platoon size element of just women. But at the end of the day, everybody was so willing to show us and anything that we needed to know and train us so that they knew that we were as efficient as we could be in order to help support them. When we got to Afghanistan, they placed us into a 2 female team and all across Afghanistan, wherever the need was. But all the teams knew we were coming, and you had teams that like specially requested a team because they said, we have a huge population of women and children, and we really, really could use that asset. So the team that we spent the majority of our time with, they actually did request us and they expected us. And I would say before we could even start to build rapport with the women and children in the village, our first mission was probably to build rapport with our teammates. And they were very quiet at first. And then, as they see that we're there to help them and we're there to work, and they finally took us under our wing, and it became an amazing experience. I'll never forget it. I'm still in touch with all the team guys that I deployed with.
Sonia, we're going to take a break in just a moment. We're talking with Sonia Buchanan. She's a technical sergeant with the Wisconsin Air National Guard. She's been serving since 2008, originally with the Wisconsin Army National Guard, but for the past few years, she's been with the Wisconsin Air National Guard. We're talking right now about her service in the Wisconsin Army National Guard and being part of the first cultural support team deployment. It was to Afghanistan, and we have many more questions to ask about that when we come back, as well as what she did after that deployment. It's an amazing career of service that's still going on. We're excited to report that as well, and we'll have much more of her story on Veterans Chronicles. We are back. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus, honored to be joined today by Wisconsin Air National Guard Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan. For several years, she served with Wisconsin Army National Guard, and during that time, she was part of the first cultural support team deployment. The deployment was to Afghanistan, and she's been telling us about what that support team did in collaboration with U.S. Special Forces, and we were just talking about how the ladies on this team eventually gelled quite well with the Special Forces. And so more follow-up questions that I'm dying to ask here, Sonia. First of all, once you did establish the rapport with the women and children of Afghanistan, what was the most interesting thing that you learned about them? Maybe that surprised you, or that was just interesting to you?
I would say the most interesting thing that I walked away with was that they were really not too different from most women that I've ever met in America, or any country for that matter. At the end of the day, there were women that wanted the best for their children and wanted the best for their husbands. And there are some cultural differences, definitely, but I think being a woman and a mother, it just resonated that really they wanted the same things for their family that we want for our family.
And during your conversations, did any of them reveal any information that was helpful tactically?
They did, and quite often, and not in the very beginning, because of course we were very different, and their concept of women and what we do was very inaccurate. But once you start a conversation and you actually explain what you do and who you are and why you're there, then we started to see the tide kind of turn. When we first got there to the specific village that we were going to be living in, at first they thought that we were concubines brought there for the team that we were with. And then that couldn't be farther from the truth. And once we talked and established what we do and why we were there, then everything started to change. And also when we started going on foot patrols every day, we had integrated a little bit of the Afghan police. And so the police actually have very intimate relationships with the local villagers. So since we knew the Afghan police, since they had been with us and, done training with us, them going on foot patrols with us in the village kind of helped validate who we were and why we were there. So it kind of made the locals feel a little bit more safe in discussing things with us. And they were also a huge asset, I think, in help building the bridge of rapport and trust.
What part of Afghanistan were you in?
We were in Helmand Province in a little village called Malazai. Lived in a little mud huts, and no running water. We had like 2 wells on the compound that we lived in, and we had a couple generators, and I literally ate beans and rice every day. And not with silverware. We didn't have silverware. Very, very austere conditions, like no restrooms. But that's what they trained us for when they integrated us into 3rd Group at Fort Bragg for training. And so we were prepared for it.
How did the men in the village respond to you?
Very standoffish at first, and because of their concept of who they thought that we were. But I would have to say that once they got to know us, very, very friendly, extremely friendly.
And did you come under fire? Was there any hostilities while you were there?
We did have hostilities. The first night, actually, that we were there, there was a grenade thrown over the wall, kind of where my teammate and I were supposed to be, like, putting our sleeping quarters. So needless to say, the next day, we cut down, there was a cornfield right outside. So it was, it provided a really good barrier for them to hide. So the cornfields were cut down the next day. There were a couple times that we were shot at, and the first team that I was with a MARSOC team up in Farah province. And I was very surprised at how initially protective they were over us and wanted us to get to the back. At first, I kind of got a little offended because I was like, we were trained for this and we're very competent. But once we got back in the truck and we were headed back, they explained why they did it. And then I was like, oh, they said, you're the only one here. You have kids that you have to go back home to. We want to make sure that you get back home safe. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're treating me like a little sister. It meant a lot to me, but I kind of told them, I really appreciate it, but I also want to protect you as well. And we all just got to work this together. So
we're talking with Sonia Buchanan of the Wisconsin Air National Guard, formerly of the Wisconsin Army National Guard. And Sonia, what would you say is the most significant ways that 9-month deployment changed you?
I would say it made me more grateful. It made me more grateful for where I was born and raised. Just thinking about how many billions of people live on the planet, and I could have been born anywhere to any family. And it made me proud to be American. It made me more grateful to be from where I was from, and grateful for everything that I have. When I was in Afghanistan, I thought that I was walking through the book of the Old Testament. In the rural villages, they just haven't progressed in like thousands of years. No technology, the basic understanding of hygiene, their basic education level. The average age for a Afghanistan individual in a rural area was 42 years old when I went over. And I was 39. I'm like, I'm a senior citizen over here. The basic education level was like 2nd grade. I felt a need to, if they could understand like all the opportunities that were out there and how much better their life could be. But on the other hand, they enjoy their life. We met amazing farmers that enjoyed farming and enjoyed their families and loved where they lived. So it's not my place to say that there is something better out there. But at the end of the day, my deployment made me extremely grateful and proud.
Sonia, what did it mean to you to be a trailblazer on these cultural support teams, and how widespread are they today?
Cultural support team is actually still going. It's been so successful. They're sending out new teams every year, which is amazing. And at first, I really didn't think much of myself as a trailblazer or breaking the glass ceiling. Just that there was an opportunity provided to me, and I was going to take advantage of it if I could. I was amazed that I was able to accomplish things that I never in my wildest dreams ever even thought that I wanted to accomplish or that I could accomplish it. It just goes to show you that you never know what you can do until it's presented to you and you actually try it and do it. But I have a daughter, and I look at how I was mothered and how I was encouraged or not encouraged or told you can do this or dream big. You can accomplish anything if you just set your mind to it. I make sure to always instill that into my daughter and into any kind of young woman that's coming into the military. Like, you don't have to be confounded by thinking, oh, I'm a woman and I can't be a mechanic, or I can't fly a jet, or I can't be in infantry. If you want to do it and you have the desire to do it and the passion, go do it, because you're probably going to make it.
Sonia, let's talk about some of the things you've experienced since being part of that cultural support team. First of all, you came home and worked as a TRICARE benefits advisor, and veterans getting timely care has obviously been a problem at times in recent years. So how would you describe the system as you saw it while you were trying to help veterans get the care they needed?
The system is there, and we do have amazing benefits. I think part of the frustrating thing for a lot of veterans when they come home is how timely access is. It's not as fast as it probably should be. And I understand that they're constantly trying to work on it and improve the system, but it's just frustrating for a lot of veterans who need to get in right away. They know that they're not in the right place and they need access to care. The VA, I think, is trying to do its absolute best to constantly improve and to work on areas where they know that, they're a little weak in. So I think if you have the opportunity to get a hold of somebody who is excellent at customer service and is willing to go the extra mile for you, that's always an amazing benefit to have.
In 2014, you attended Drill Sergeant Academy, which I imagine was a little more fun than being on the receiving end of that in basic training. So describe that experience a little bit and what you learned makes a good drill sergeant.
That's so true, that it is better to be on the other side. But going to Drill Sergeant Academy, we also were being scrutinized and yelled at by our Drill Sergeant Academy instructors. So if you think drill sergeants are intense, then just take it up a notch and think how intense your Drill Sergeant Academy instructor is. Constantly got yelled at for smiling. Like, stop smiling, Buchanan. No one's going to take you seriously. But I was like, it's my personality. It was an amazing experience. It was extremely hard, but it was also one of those moments that I never thought of myself as wanting to be a drill sergeant, and let alone never ever thought that I would be able to make it through the academy before I went. Once you get there and you realize this is just another school, it might be a little bit harder. It's shaping you and it's training you so that you can train and motivate and educate a civilian and help them in that process of becoming a military service member. And for me, that really resonated with me, because pouring into people and help developing people become their absolute best version of themselves is a huge passion of mine. If there's any opportunity to pour into an individual to help them or motivate them, inspire them, I'm always willing to do it. It's weird to say, but I actually enjoyed the Drill Sergeant Academy. It's when there's a little bit of grittiness and it's really hard, but you end up working for it and then you end up getting that reward, it means so much more. And it helped me reshape my mind and how I view probably other service members as well, especially young privates or young little airmen.
Sonia, obviously different recruits are different. Their minds work a little bit differently, but I know a lot of folks, when they watch the movies, they just think, the drill sergeant's there to kind of make their lives miserable and eventually build them into the soldier that they want them to be. What's the key to that, to get someone to think about, whether it's thinking about the unit more than themselves or have just the proper mindset to be in the service?
I think you're absolutely right. It is tapping into that individual and finding out what motivates them, or finding out what they think their purpose is here, and also letting them know that being in the military, you're here to serve the greater good. It's just not all about you and what you can contribute. It's about you and your entire team. So you always need to be cognizant of taking care of the person that's in front of you or in back of you, be it if you're in an office environment or if you're out in a combat zone. It's always about service, serving others, and in return, that is all going to come back to you. But from a drill sergeant perspective, kind of looking at it as educating an individual and then figuring out, do you understand what your purpose is and why you're here and what motivates you? If you can understand that in an individual and pour into them and reshape them, you're only doing a little bit, and then all of a sudden you see that individual just go above and beyond and is extremely motivated and will do anything for you.
We're speaking with Sonia Buchanan. She is a technical sergeant in the Wisconsin Air National Guard. When we come back, our final minutes with Sergeant Buchanan. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Thank you so much for being with us. Our guest this week is Technical Sergeant Sonia Buchanan of the Wisconsin Air National Guard, formerly of the Army National Guard. And Sonia, you were the first female, not only to be part of the combat support team, but also the first female in the state of Wisconsin integrated into a combat arms unit, officially the 105th Cavalry. Talk about that experience a little bit. What was the training like, and what did you think of it?
I think when they came to me with this and asked me if I'd be willing to do it, to be quite honest with you, when I first joined the Army National Guard, there was always one unit that kind of stood alone as being excellent. If you wanted to go to a place of excellence because, you're like, that place is amazing. That's what the 105th Cav was for the Guard. I was intimidated, but I was also excited for the challenge. It was amazing. I was the first female in a group of 400 cavalry men. On the full-time side, there was a small group, amazing men, jokesters. I'm going to just tell you that lots of jokes every day. The guys would take my hand lotion and like my lip gloss off my desk and leave me a little ransom note saying, "You're in combat arms now, honey. There's no need for this here." And then I'd have to go on this scavenger hunt to find my belongings. But they did it all in fun. Out in the field for training, which was kind of new for me on the tactical side because I was learning things that I never had to do on my deployment. They were so amazing. They all became like big brothers to me, were so willing to show me anything that I needed to know and like walk me through it and help me feel comfortable. I absolutely loved being in the Cav. And to this day, I am so close with that group of like full-time guys that just kind of like took me under their wing and was like, "We're going to show you what to do. We want you to be successful." And I was like, it really meant a lot to me.
Just a few years ago, you crossed over from the Army National Guard to the Air National Guard. Why did you make that move?
I did do it. I made the move on for a couple different reasons. For a personal reason, and then professionally, at that time, NGB had pulled back a lot of E7 slots. Once that happened, I kind of knew for myself, for me to get promoted, it probably wasn't going to happen for quite a while, but they were available on the Air Guard side. And since I had worked in the beginning of my career at Joint Force Headquarters, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting a lot of amazing Air Guard people. So I kind of sent out an email to a friend, and it was an easy transition. I just kept my rank and I crossed over, and I worked for the counter drug department for a little while. I have to say the culture is very different on the air side. It's like the softer side versus the Army. And I think, to be quite honest with you, at my age, like going out and sleeping in a tent in the freezing winter, which I would be doing if I was in the Cav, it's not quite as appealing as it once was. No, it's definitely a little bit more comfortable on the air side.
So just about a minute left in our conversation here, Sonia. You have been in the service now for more than 12 years. You've had a lot of different experiences. When you think back to the decision you've made, what do you think now, and what are you most proud of during those dozen years?
I couldn't imagine myself doing anything different now. Although I never imagined myself being in the military, I'm extremely glad that I did. I'm especially glad that I did because of the example that it is for both of my children. And my son ended up joining, and he currently is stationed at Fort Drum as a combat medic. For Olivia, she's able to go to college now. She goes to University of Kentucky because I went on the deployment. That was my primary motivating factor, was to make sure that, the kids had college funds. So I transferred my GI Bill over to her, and she's going to school and enjoying it. And I would say, hands down, probably my most memorable or proud moment, it would have to be going on a cultural support team deployment. I don't think I'll ever be able to experience anything like that again in my career, even though I would love to do something like that again. It'd be an amazing opportunity.
Sonia, it's an amazing record of service, and you've explained it so well. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your service to our country.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. It's been a pleasure.
Sonia Buchanan is a technical sergeant in the Wisconsin Air National Guard, formerly the Wisconsin Army National Guard. We've also been joined by Therese Hughes, an acclaimed photographer and author. Her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit was on display at the Women in Military Service for America Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. In March of 2021, her book based on that exhibit of women veterans will be released. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.